Man, this battle is really tough. It is quite challenging to fight off the invaders for once.
Yeah, defeating the imperialist Japanese army was kinda rewarding.
Indeed, Dandozwar, but at last we saved China. We are now the heroes of Nanking. Heroes of Nanking.
Sure, it was a unique experience. Not every second World War II game is set in China. Wait, are there even other games set in China other than Easy Red 2?
I don't think so. Most games set in this conflict only bother to showcase the same 4 famous battles of history, like D-Day and Stalingrad.
Boring. We definitely need more creative games. Like when will I be able to play as the Allies in the liberation of Pisa?
Dando, nobody wants to play as the Allies during the liberation of Pisa of the 2nd of September 1944. Though your question about variety in World War II games is more than fair. Why are some battles depicted more often than others, and what battles are the most and least common?
Dang, for once this seems like a useful video. We could even try to rank games based on how creative they are with their scenarios. What games are the most unique in this regard? And which one are the least inspired? Should we give it a go?
You know what? Why not? I'm not winning this battle anyways, too many casualties. But first things first, roll the intro.
Of course, just when I was starting to win.
For those who are not aware, the Second World War was a major conflict that took place in the previous century across the entire globe. It was fought between the Allies and the Axis, mostly in Europe, North Africa and the Pacific Ocean.
Wow, you should have a low esteem of your subscribers.
Ah, come on, Dando, don't be silly. I know that 96% of you are not subscribed.
Oof. Jokes aside, it's quite clear why so many games decided to pick World War II as their setting. Not only it reshaped the world as we know it, but also it was incredibly iconic, being depicted in movies, series, novels. We still have living veterans today who can tell us first-handedly the horrors of this war. Even if it started over 80 years ago, it's still very much alive in our imagination, so it's inevitable that it's so present in video games too.
Especially during the PlayStation 2 era, when first-person shooters became more common, developers decided the most emotional and recognizable conflict to use as a setting had to be the Second World War. Think of all the Medal of Honors, Call of Duty, Brothers in Arms, amongst many. To this day, we still get games set in this historic conflict, developed by grandchildren of the people who fought during the war.
And yet, for many reasons, the video game industry tends to represent over and over the same battles, ignoring the majority of them. How many times have you climbed the cliff of Omaha Beach? Or captured the Reichstag in Berlin? Clearly, these iconic events attract most of the attention, but still, it's called World War for a reason.
And that is precisely the scope of this video. What games better depict the globalness of the war? To answer this question, we gotta do a little something called research.
Oh no, please! Not data collection and calculus, I'm not an engineer!
Well, I am Dando, and Excel is the closest thing I have to a loyal friend. So to properly analyze the way the war is depicted in the digital world, we have to count how many times a battle appears within multiple titles, the frequency of how often a specific event is recreated and made playable.
Of course, history is not mathematics. It's not always easy to classify exactly when a battle ends and the following begins. We tried to consider a key event as an important stage of the fighting on a given front. An example could be the Eastern Front. We subdivided the campaign into 4 key events: Operation Barbarossa, the Siege of Stalingrad, the Soviet advance in Eastern Europe, and the Battle of Berlin. We did the same with all major fronts, so we also divided Pacific and North Africa in multiple different events.
To standardize our research, we only took in exam ground operations, thus we excluded naval-only battles, such as the Battle of the Atlantic with the U-boats, and air battles, like the Battle of Britain. In total, we gathered 55 different games and categorized them in 29 different key events. Not all games made abundantly explicit where their campaigns take place, but we tried our best to make reasonable guesses. So Dando, what are our results?
Some were quite predictable, but you'd be surprised by some others. Let us take a closer look at the data. Let's start with the key events themselves. Out of 29, Germany fights in 18 of them, while Japan is only in 10 others. The odd one out is the Winter War between Finland and the Soviets. Just from these numbers, it's clear that Europe is much more represented than Asia. Furthermore, most of the key events include the USA or the USSR. Only 5 battles takes place in the earliest stages of the war, like the invasion of Poland, France and China.
Speaking of fronts, to no one's surprise, the Normandy Landing is the most common event of the war depicted in gaming, with 29 appearances. More than half of the games we examined had it. Coming at a close second is the Battle of the Bulge with 27 cameos. For third we have the Liberation of France with 18, and for fourth a tie between the Battle of Stalingrad and the Soviet counter-invasion, both with 16.
It's clear why we have these results. The Normandy Landing and the Battle of the Bulge have a huge impact on the American culture, being two of the most hard-fought battles for the nation. We have to remember that most video games are made by Americans for Americans, thus this imbalance is predictable. The Liberation of France could seem a bit surprising, but really is more or less the battle in between Normandy and the Bulge, so it works as a bridge between the two. Lastly, Stalingrad and Operation Kutsov, even being fought by the Soviets, were the turning point of the war in Europe, meaning they received more attention.
We should not underestimate the influence movies had on the choosing of the setting for various games. Saving Private Ryan and Enemy at the Gates are blockbusters released around the PS2 era that were reimagined in numerous games, like Call of Duty 2 and Medal of Honor Allied Assault.
In the middle of the list, we find events that were quite important but did not shape the collective imagination. The Tunisian campaign, the Italian front and the fighting of Guadalcanal are well known, but not as famous. In this range also fought the Battle of Berlin, that sure is famous, but it gives developers little space to work with. On the opposite side, but with similar frequency, we have the special operations in Norway. This is such a minor and unknown event of the war that the game studios can tackle it with free rein.
Only 5 campaigns made a single appearance in the list. Amongst them we find the Second Sino-Japanese War, a yes, important event, but one that appeals only to the Chinese market, and the obscure Battle of Kos, part of the Dodecanese campaign. The sole reason this very specific event is present in Easy Red 2 is probably because the developer of the indie title is Italian and wanted to depict a rare instance where the Italian army fought the Germans.
If you're curious to see the frequency of all the key events that we have found, you can check the spreadsheet link in the description. This is the result of this old fox obsession with Excel. Please take your time looking at it or you'll get depressed or something.
Dandoz, don't act like I'm some kind of weirdo, but please do take a look. I even put colorful flags.
Attaboy, attaboy. But anyways, now that we have looked at the key events, let us look at the games. Is it possible to measure the creativity of a title based on the campaign present in it?
Of course it is, thanks to the power of friendship and mathematics.
Why did I agree to work with you again? Go on, please. I promise it's fascinating. Don't close the video.
We know how often a key event appears in the gaming world. Thus, we can deduce that campaigns that showcase less known events are by definition more creative. If we give scores to every battle's rarity, we can calculate the score of each campaign by averaging every key event that appears within it.
As an example, we can look at the classic Call of Duty World at War. The game followed 2 campaigns, the Eastern Front from Stalingrad to the fall of Berlin, and the Pacific Theater from Makin to Okinawa. All of these fronts are in the middle of the list or below, so the title gets quite a high score.
A title like Call of Duty 3 is instead a bit less inspired, since it focuses only on 2 very common events, the Normandy Landings and the Liberation of France. Therefore, its score is among the lowest on our list.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but in this way, wouldn't the games with more campaigns be penalized against titles that have less events? A game like Easy Red 2 sure has the Normandy Landings and the Bulge, but it also has Dodecanese and China. That has to be worth something.
That is an excellent point. By this logic, games that have so many fronts are inevitably going to end up being average. Therefore, I added something to the equation that rewards unique campaigns without harming the more frequent ones. It is not a perfect solution, but it does make the results a bit clearer. And speaking of results...
The top 5 most creative games according to our criteria are Land of War The Beginning, Medal of Honor Rising Sun, Rising Storm, Medal of Honor Pacific Assault, and Battlefield 1943. It's clear that games set in the Pacific Theater are more creative. This is because almost every game set in Europe shared the same common events, while the Pacific is more diversified. The odd one out is the winner of this ranking, Land of War The Beginning. This game only depicts the German invasion of Poland, something the only codenamed Panzer Phase 1 and Theater of War also do.
The lower 5 on the list are Call of Duty 3, Brothers in Arms Road to Hill 30, Call of Duty World War II, Steel Division, and Sniper Elite 5. Let us be very clear, we have nothing against these games. They all probably give their own interesting historical perspective to the conflict, but it is mathematically undeniable that their campaigns are set in the most generic fronts of the war. I will let you guess where these games are set.
Of course, we cannot talk about all the 55 games we have examined, but there are some compelling cases we want to share. The aforementioned Theatre of War, even if it scores in the middle of the list, it's quite a creative tactical game. The player can play as both the Polish and the French armies, trying to fend off the Germans, while in the majority of games, at most you see these events from the Axis side.
Another interesting case study is Sniper Elite 3, a title that is set in North Africa, more specifically in Libya and Egypt in 1941. Most games set in Africa during the Second World War usually depict the Americans or major battles. Few set espionage missions in the desert like Sniper Elite does, making this title a unique combination on the list.
Lastly, how could we not talk once more about Easy Red 2? The game does an outstanding job at bringing some rare campaigns, like the Dodecanese, China, Marshall Islands and 1940 France. It doesn't get to the top position of the list only because it also represents very common fronts, like the Battle of the Bulge and Stalingrad. In the end, I would say that games like this one are the most varied and fun, because they both show the classic events of the war, but also obscure ones. What do you say, Paul?
I agree, Dando. Games with many fronts, while they fall in the middle of the list, do offer tons of options and at times even some rare events. But regardless, all games in the list have something to offer, and it is fascinating to observe the variety there is in depicting the war within gaming. So Dando, what have we learned from this analysis?
The list we made is not a list of most recommended games, but instead is a useful tool to reflect upon how the war is depicted in the video game media. Clearly, there are games that focus on a single key event, and there's nothing wrong with that, but surely being able to explore different locations within the same title lets the player better dive into the mechanics of the game and into history.
For this reason, we hope that in the future more studios will try to follow Easy Red 2 and Theatre of War's footsteps, being ambitious and depicting numerous fronts. The Second World War was fought all across the globe by all different people. It is important to have more perspectives when depicting such an important historical event, both in traditional media as well as in games.
I do agree. Sure, we can only welcome a different outlook on the war events, like it was playing, at last, the Second Sino-Japanese War.
A look we got while becoming the Heroes of Nankin. Heroes of Nankin.
Again? Are you alright, mate? Anyways, which campaign or front would you like to be able to play? Let us know in the comments below.
If you made it this far, I wanted to thank you one too many fronts times for watching today's video. This one requires some research to complete, yet with my good friend Dandoz, it was a walk in the park. We both hope you enjoyed this video and we wish you a wonderful day. Until next time, arrivederci!